people really don't understand like how different cultures can be. The thing that I love about Australians is people express how they feel. In Canada, it's been extremely difficult for me to acclimate because there's a passive aggressive non-verbal language that happens, particularly between males. So, and the unique echo chamber that is the music and art scene in Australia, they're just so separated from the rest of the world that it just feels like artists have just got a much more unique and independent voice through whatever medium it is that they're speaking through.
Greetings, Legion. Welcome to episode 269 of Into the Necrosphere. Joining me on the podcast this week is the great David Stepanavicius of Atrae Bilis out of Canada. He joined me to talk about their sophomore album, Aumicide, which was released on 20 Buck Spin last year. We also spoke at length about the Australian metal scene, our shared experiences of relocating from our own countries to foreign lands, and we did a deep dive into Warfare, the movie by Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza that I raved about on last week's news rant. That conversation is coming your way very shortly, but before we get to that, I have no less than two premieres on the Sphere lined up for the Legion this week, and we start off with Trivax, a band that you should all be familiar with. Their forthcoming album, The Great Satan, is due for release on May the 30th. It's going to be coming out on Osmos Productions, their first for Osmos. It follows up to the exceptionally well-received Eloah Burns Out, and for the very first time ever, you, the Legion, get to have a little taste of their new single and music video. This is Operation Ramadan. The first of two premieres on the Sphere, on Into the Necrosphere this week. That was Trivax with Operation Ramadan, off their forthcoming album, The Great Satan, due for release on May the 30th. It's going to be dropped on Osmos Productions, and I will post a link to pre-order the record in the description to the podcast. Easily one of my most anticipated records of 2025. I heard it in full about a month ago, and I can tell you right now, it does not disappoint. I know that the Legion are themselves fans of Trivax. Cheyenne, of course, the most prolific, the most pervasive guest on Into the Necrosphere, and he and I will almost certainly be doing something again nearer the release of this record. But yeah, definitely want to check out, and make sure that you hit that pre-order link and you say thanks to Cheyenne and to Trivax for premiering that song on the show. My friends, before we go any further, a quick reminder that I am a card-carrying member of the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse. Every Monday, we kick off your week with another installment of Horrorwolf 666, courtesy of Brandon Legion. Yours truly casts hexes and slays poses on Into the Necrosphere every Tuesday. Next week, I'm going to be talking to Jonas Holmberg of This Gift is a Curse, so look out for that. On a Wednesday, we have Sensei Mike Hill of the bands Tombs and Scorpion Throne delivering a fresh episode of Everything Went Black. We also double your pleasure because Cheyenne of Trivax, the very same Cheyenne of Trivax, comes your way with another episode of Iblis Manifestations. On a Thursday, we do another double shot. We've got Sensei Mike Hill returning alongside his co-hosts, the Outlaw Mike Scondado and the Professor Jeff Kashid, for one of my favorite shows of the week, Necromaniacs. And then we also have the Sinister Minister Carl Haikara coming your way with an episode of Soul Knox. He does the second, the second installment, the second dose of Soul Knox every Sunday, and then wraps up your week. So make sure that you follow us all. Make sure you follow Into the Necrosphere on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. You can also, if you're a unsigned band and you want to get your music heard on the show, drop me a line on intothenecrosphere@gmail.com. And of course, I don't mention it every week, but just a reminder that if you do want to buy yourself some Into the Necrosphere merch, you can head over to the Into the Necrosphere Teespring store. If you're watching this on YouTube, there should be links for you to go and buy yourself some t-shirts, some tank tops, hoodies, whatever the spirit moves you to pick up. My friends, stick around because coming up later in the show, we have a second premiere on the Sphere, a brand new Conspiracy X track. I'm also going to be listening to new music by a ton of bands, including Celestial Sanctuary. The dog is distracting me now, so I'm going to forget what I spoke about in the news rant. But safe to say, it is an hour and 15 minutes worth of fucking pure acid from start to finish. I also answered a bunch of your questions. We spoke about things like my favorite, or my most memorable moments in the WWE. Some of my bad takes on metal, my favorite bad takes in metal. I spoke about the artists or musicians that I hate most in the world, which obviously sits completely in my wheelhouse. So that news rant coming your way later on in the show. First up, though, sit back and enjoy as I welcome for the very first time to Into the Necrosphere, David from Atrae Bilis. Okay. Or like I said, the byproduct of Carney's Canada is, they preemptively considered the conversation too hot for the internet. So we were talking about cassettes for Atrae Bilis and for Aumicide. But yeah, you guys put out, or 20 Bucks Spin put out a vinyl and cassette. How quickly did those cassettes sell?
I don't know. We are not privy to how many units 20 Bucks Spin actually produces. I'm not sure if other bands on the label know this information. I know that we had asked for it and that information was just not provided. But in saying that, we do get financial updates with the label. So, we know when we're in the clear, when everybody's making money, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we don't have too many concerns with that. I guess a lot of that probably ties in to different bands' contractual agreements. I'm not sure if all or many other bands, sorry, I should back up. Different bands work differently, and so their engagements with the label are very different. Some bands self-fund albums and hand it over to the label and offer it to the label. And I'm sure there are other bands that don't. So I think a lot of how many units are reproduced probably depends on whether or not there was a production advance or not. But long way short, I don't know how many units were produced. All I know is, when we run out, we run out. And when we're making money, we're making money.
So are those clip speakers that you've got on the bookshelf behind you, were they funded by the handsome profits from Aumicide?
That would have been my day job. Thank you, IWD.
Yeah, dude, I was reading some interesting stuff today about just music business related malarkey that I actually wanted to get your take on.
Sure.
This is something that I find utterly befuddling. I just need to pull this up actually so that I can read it, and I'm not misrepresenting anybody here. But this was specifically around some of the things that are happening in Europe around merch sales. And there's a lot of things about this industry I find strange, and I have conversations with guests on the podcast, with friends outside the outside of the podcast about this an awful lot. But so the post here reads: a recurring problem of venue commission and merch prices. A few years ago in Europe, most big and medium-sized venues started charging bands up to 25% commission for selling merch. Added to this is European VAT, sometimes between 20 and 25%, depending on the country, and a credit card fee. So sometimes you're looking at an overall fee of higher than 25%. For this service, the venue most of the time provides a few sellers for a few hours, sometimes not at all. On a big tour, commission can go up to 10,000 euros a night. Band has to supply the salary of the merch manager and additional staff, transport of the merch, manufacturing of the merch, all the customs. I'm reading this, and it's just the most fucking insane, like daylight robbery I've ever seen in my entire life. It's fucking extortion, is what it is.
Oh, it is. A lot of musicians have come back and said, "Oh, absolutely no problem. Like we're 100% cool with that. If you're 100% cool with us taking a percentage off all of your bar sales."
Which is exactly what they should do. I think I said this on the news rant. I like, if you're the one responsible for drawing people into the venue and therefore generating revenue out of the bar, surely you need to get a little taste. If they're going to get a taste of your merch. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I don't know what it's like in Europe. We haven't toured Europe yet, but I know that it fluctuates in the States. I mean, we've done 4 US tours of the States at this point, and at different points, there have been the same venues either taking merch cuts and then not taking merch cuts, and then taking merch cuts and then not taking merch cuts. From my understanding, a lot of that had to do with Live Nation kind of spearheading a lot of that. I haven't seen as much of it. We didn't get any merch cuts on our last tour, which was really nice. But, from an ethics point of view, I completely agree with you. But what other people are completely forgetting too is, there's the upfront investment of even stepping onto the soil. Some bands need to get some visas, and I mean, it's not even venue to venue, but it's country to country, and that's what's really tough. I think a lot of people don't really understand how much work is put in behind the scenes. And, when you've got a few T-shirts and you've got a price tag on them and other people feel entitled to taking a percentage off that, it's ignorance, and greed to a certain extent. I don't know. I mean, I can't really comment without having a discussion with, these venue owners and, these groups that feel that they have a right to do this. I mean, a touring musician is a glorified T-shirt salesperson. So, to take a cut out of that, it's not encouraging for bands to continue out on tour, because most I don't know. Like, I'm sure a lot of bigger bands have got much bigger guarantees, obviously, but for small to medium-sized bands, a lot of the time, the guarantees, that's kind of covering your gas, accommodation, a dinner buyout. But the real profit comes from the merchandising, and there's so many other loopholes to jump through. I mean, we're a Canadian band, and if we tour America, we simply can't accept American money into a Canadian bank account. We have to have a US-based merchandising store who produces the goods for us, And then we use a Square reader, to read credit cards and phone tap payments, etc. And then those sales are registered through their business. They take their cut on all the processing that goes through all that, and then we get paid out what we do after that. So if you've got people taking a percentage on that front end, it's like, well, we're already giving percentages out to everybody else, and it's not like it's not like.
What, roughly speaking, what percentage of the cake is left when everybody has had their taste?
Percentages, I don't know. That'd be a really good question for Luca, the drummer in our band. We try and assign as best we can different responsibilities amongst the band. The more you price, the higher you price things, the more money you're going to get. And I think that's what a lot of bands are doing now, and it's normalizing these really exorbitant prices for merchandise at the moment. And that, to me, is what's more alarming, because it makes merchandise unaffordable for a lot of people in this economy. We played a local show, and I'm not going to say who the band was, but there was a single color T-shirt that was being sold for 35 Canadian. Now, that's normal. I remember going to go buy 2 color T-shirts for $15. I guess that marks my age. And then on an international level, I just got to preface this. I was on the door list. I didn't go and see Arch Enemy, but I was
about to say the fucking interview's over if you're confessed to that.
That's it. No, a friend in one of the bands that was playing had toured with us with another band that he was in, and went down to go see him perform, and it was great. Thank you, Blue. But while I was there, I saw that Arch Enemy was selling single color T-shirts for $60. And you just think, like, there's tip options and all that kind of stuff. And I just think that is just, it's madness. So you can just see people just rising the prices because it's become normalized. And other people look over at the other desk, and then there's price matching that a lot of the headliner bands, ensure the other bands are obligated to proceed with. And so you're at the mercy of what the headline bands are charging for, and it's a whole political ecosystem with merchandise. And of course, venues just see those high prices and say, oh, well, if you're selling these T-shirts for $50-$60, what's $5? What's $10 off that? It means nothing. If we see a queue, out the street around the corner to buy these. So it's not cool. It shouldn't be happening, but sorry.
I'm very pro business. I work in, my day job is business, and one of the fundamental principles of running a smart, sustainable business is that if you interject yourself into the value chain, you need to be adding value. Hence the name. And what it sounds like to me is, these dudes add zero value. They're the ones that extract all the value, because like I said, the principle for me is you're the name bringing people into the bar and getting them drinking. And that's where they make most of their money from. They're certainly not spending the money on, let's be honest, most venues, how much money actually gets spent on upkeep of the venue? They all look fucking dilapidated. They barely clean the toilets. Yeah. There's zero value being added. They make as much as they possibly can, and then they want to stick their hands in the pockets of the bands that actually help them to exist. I just think it's fucking insane.
Yeah, I will say, I can't speak on behalf of Europe, but I will say from my observations, it's very venue specific. Like, there are venues that go so far out of their way to be so incredibly accommodating to the artists that are passing through. It's free food. It's a floor to sleep on if you need it. It's, directions to the next spot. It's, whatever they can do to accommodate, free beer if that's your thing.
Prostitutes.
And then you've got the others. So it's like anything, I think, there's just a lot of bad eggs out there, and, they're louder and people are more disappointed with their attitudes. But a lot of these venues are run by musicians as well, and they've got the artist's interest at heart. So, thankfully we're not on a massive tier of touring artists where we're targeted for our merch sales, and most things are kept in house at this level.
Where you're targeted for exploitation. Yeah. It just feels to me like across the board in the music industry, and this is when we're talking about labels, it got my gears turning towards talking about these venue merch cuts. But yeah, there seems to be all of these grifters that are just there to fucking steal money from everybody. But at the same time, if I'm reading you correctly, it also presents an opportunity for people that actually do something that's artist centric to make a difference, and hopefully at the very least carve a niche out for themselves. There are bigger players that'll have those practices that'll probably always exist because people are dumb enough to sign with them or do business with them or play shows at their venues. But you would hope that it creates a gap for a label with the appropriate level of integrity and business smarts, same for venues, etc., to position themselves in the industry in a way that favors them too and favors the artists.
Absolutely. I think the other thing that's worth kind of mentioning as the silver lining of this is just the value of community. So, word travels pretty fast from touring bands which venues not to play at, not to book at, and if there's enough of those bands talking amongst themselves, there's not as many shows that are happening in that venue. And where it can't be avoided, we've thankfully been in a position where we have other bands reaching out. Hey, this is the merchandise form that we had filled out. We suggest that you do this, and that. This was our experience, and help guide you through that process. And, they don't have to be consultants to us. They're just fellow musicians that are just kind of sharing their wisdom and their experience. So, I think it's important for all bands to do that because, high tides raise all ships. So there is that aspect of it as well, which, is the reason that we do it.
So let me ask you this question, getting back to $20 Spin. We were mentioning before that we ran into the technical gremlins. You are in some very, very solid company on that label, band-wise. They're a label that consistently puts out quality. How do you feel you guys have landed there?
Well, we were invited by the label to have the initial discussions, which was very humbling. We originally found our home there by sending, copies of Divine Nihility out to a slew of labels before it was released, and found its home at Transcending Obscurity. And then once it was released, and it was presented, and I get the response was gauged, I guess. It was interesting to see other labels kind of reach out to us, and $20 Spin was one of them. So we were very fortunate for that. As far as how I feel about how we've been placed, I think the band's sound has changed a lot from the sound of the band when $20 Spin heard us. And I would say I think it's pretty safe to assume that most people would probably think that we're quite a different sounding death metal band to the typical $20 Spin death metal sound. So again, in that sense, it's very humbling. But we do feel, although we feel at home there, we feel like we definitely have our own personality amongst the roster. In our own way, which is great, and hopefully that's kind of celebrated from most of the listenership of the label, and not just I'm not sure, just disregarded as being too different. But
Well, this is my thinking. I mean, you guys are a band, I think, that need a specific kind of label to support you. If you're going to have a label that adds any sort of value to the band, it needs to be a label that is quite open-minded, because I think it's quite difficult to put you guys into a specific bucket music-wise, which is probably, coming back to what we were talking about in our first attempt at a conversation. It's why it's taken a year for people, I think, to properly digest Aumicide, and now for the momentum, at least as it feels to me, to really start picking up for the band.
Yeah, I think there's a few factors that could go into Atrae Bilis being more welcomed as time goes. Well, I don't want to say more welcomed. We always felt welcome, but I think there's a deeper understanding of what the band is about as time has gone on. And I think $20 Spin in its own way has kind of become something a little closer to, more of the golden years of Relapse Records, potentially, where there are, and I think we will look back on this period quite fondly in 20, 30 years time and look back at these releases and just think, Jesus, there were some real heavy hitters for the time. So I think that's got a lot to do with it. And, maybe $20 Spin also has the advantage that it's like a great entry point for beginner to intermediate to experienced metal listeners as well. They do have a roster that's quite easy to digest, and then they've got stuff that's quite left of center, and it's, I guess in their vision, and it's been cool to see, because most of the bands that Dave signs to are new bands. They're not established bands. So it's great to see him give these new bands a platform and a proper podium to speak from.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely agree with you about us being spoiled for choice at the moment. And you do wonder every year. I think to myself, I wonder when this must end at some point, because everything happens in peaks and troughs. Everything comes in waves. But we've had this wave really now since, I would argue, maybe 2015, 2016, where every single year there's just so many good albums. And then you go, no possible way can 2023 be better than 2022. Sure enough, 2023 comes and it's, you've got a bunch of great albums. Last year was just absolutely outrageous. And this year so far has been pretty strong as well. I don't think I'm quite as blown away by some of the releases that have come out this year as I was last year, although that being said, there are a few things starting to really creep through the woodwork now that I'm very, very impressed with. One of them was the new Scour album, which I like Scour, but I didn't expect them to do something that's that fucking hard hitting and badass. And there's a few other things that have come out as well. So it feels like the year is now starting to find its feet too.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of bands also want to release stuff during summer in North America, so they can tour it and time it with all the fests that usually start around May as well. And then you've got, generally speaking, anyways, then you've got another tide of releases coming through that are close enough that people will remember the releases for the end of year lists. So it's still fresh in people's minds, but not too late that it'll be dropped off those lists, because, these lists never actually happen in the new year. They always happen, before the year's ended.
They happen in October if you're if you're certain magazines and certain websites.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's I do always feel that the first few months of the year are quite slow, but last year, I remember in January there was it Vitriol? There was Vipasi, which was another fantastic band that I don't think enough people really listen to, and so it was like, damn. Straight out of the gate, there's some really impressive stuff. And then I think Brodequin came out very early as well. It was
Brodequin, I think, was Feb.
There you go. Yeah. So it was, it was a nice consistent year of releases last year. I think
a good trickle. But that point you just brought up now about lists that get done in October and stuff like that, it actually ties into something else that I wouldn't say that bugs me, but just that my thinking is very, very different to their thinking. So I was watching some of the footage that's coming out from the Inferno Festival. One of the panels was specifically about old media. And I don't even know who it was, but one of the guys being interviewed on the panel was talking about how, the reason they put out, magazine cover after magazine cover with Metallica or Ghost is so that they can promote smaller bands. And I just thought to myself, I understand the profit motive, and I understand why, why magazines do it. They have to make a living. They have to be able to sustain themselves. But I also just feel like, at least for me, I mean, I don't have a profit incentive with this podcast. I will feature only bands I like and only things I want to have on. And that's I feel like that's just that was, again, part of the intent of starting the show. Like I always wanted to retain that sort of purity. And it goes back to the stuff that inspired me as well. Metal Maniacs inspired me. And again, I'm not suggesting that they did it, as a fucking, as a not-for-profit, but it felt more real. It felt like they weren't chasing, they weren't chasing money or looking at year-over-year sales growth. I don't even care about euro. I look at it and it's kind of interests me, but I don't really give a fuck about year-over-year viewership growth and subscriber growth. And so if I had 10 people that followed the podcast, I'd still do it exactly the same way as it gets done now.
Yeah, no, and that's awesome. And to that note, thank you for having a chat with us. Appreciate that you enjoy it enough to let us have a chat with you. So I don't know. I mean, I've also got my own opinions about what's popular in heavy music, and anybody that knows me personally knows that I make no qualms about it. I'm very brutal about my opinions as to what's trending and what's popular. And I think, where it becomes difficult for me is, I don't know, heavy music. I feel like at this point in time, for as long as heavy music has had to shapeshift and transmogrify and evolve, there's less teeth than I'd like the beast to have. And maybe certain his Duffman.
I was about to say, speaking of beasts, perfect time.
It absolutely was. And there are certainly genres that have become synonymous with don't and I think that should exist. But I don't understand why people say there shouldn't be any gatekeeping. And it's like, well, it is just kind of, it's putting a quality assurance stamp on a lot of stuff. So, popular music is unfortunately always going to be pushed by people who are running these magazines. At one time it was television shows. And it all just comes down to their taste, and there's nothing we can really do about it.
I mean, it's for the same reason that now I'm sat here with an Exorcist T-shirt and you're sat with a Stallone T-shirt. It's nostalgia. At the end of the day, it's why you have your video collection behind you as well.
It's the over the top.
That is a hard T-shirt, a very hard T-shirt. Now, one of the things that secured your prime of place on Into the Necrosphere was when you emailed me and said, I've watched this movie that I think you'd really like, Warfare. And as anybody who watched last week's episode will know, I absolutely flipped out over this. So I did want us to spend a fair bit of time discussing this movie, because I have not had in my entire life, and I've been watching movies regularly at the theater for the better part of 4 decades. I'm not somebody who like casually watches film. I consider myself a very, very hardcore film connoisseur. Never once in my entire life have I had such a profoundly moving and intense experience inside of a movie theater.
Yeah. I mean, Titanic didn't do that to you? Come on, Jackie.
Well, with the exception of Titanic,
okay.
and of course, Avatar after the first attack on Pandora, that really left me rattled.
You're only human after all. Yeah, no, I made sure that I did go and see it at the movie because, I mean, it's an experience. I'd say it's an experience. More than anything else. I'm sure you've got more to add to this if you haven't already. But to see it on the big screen, to hear it with proper sound system really puts you into the combat scenario that, is the set and setting for the movie. So to see it, in a lounge room is really doing the experience an injustice. So I hope it gets like a wider independent release. But yeah, I made sure that I got the VIP tickets with, the reclining chairs and the proper food service and stuff.
Did you see it in an IMAX theater, surround sound, or was it a smaller cinema?
Well, I don't want to say it was a smaller cinema. I don't think it qualified as an IMAX, but it was a huge screen, and it was limited seating in there because it was the Fandangle kind of pompous VIP seating and catering and all that jazz. So
can you watch a movie any other way?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and it was great. Yeah, so it was definitely big. It was definitely loud. I was in a tense state for the majority of the film. Even before it really ramped up, there was just there's that plodding sense of dread that I just love in movies. If I can just be suspended in dread for a good 30, 40 minutes, I'm all in. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to add to it without giving too much away. But it sounds stunning.
There's no real spoilers because it's based on truth. You can pretty much, we won't indicate who gets mortally wounded or anything like that. But again, that happens relatively early on in the show. And by the way, this fucking fly that's flying around here at the moment. There's going to be some warfare breaking out very shortly.
Can you hear it? No, you can't hear it. You've got your
I can't hear it. But it's this. It's I love living in the countryside. But come the summer, holy Jesus, it's fucking it's just swarms of all sorts of shit that descend on your house. But just getting back to this. So you're absolutely right about it being an experience. I tried to explain to somebody the other day, and I said, do not go into the movie expecting to see Black Hawk Down, Saving Private Ryan, Full Metal Jacket, nothing. It actually doesn't. It basically doesn't even have a plot. It's like you're dropped in as a fucking body cam on one of these soldiers, and you're just watching them go about their it plays out over the course of probably 24 hours. And you're watching them effectively take a position with it. Once they've taken that position, the situation then escalates. It then escalates some more into something that is absolutely more horrific than we could ever possibly imagine ourselves in. And then it's how they try and extract themselves from that situation. And that effectively is the movie.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And they didn't, I didn't expect, how it took the turn at the end. And I thought that was one of the hardest kind of phone calls to make in, as I guess, what would that person be? A commander or a sergeant? I'm not sure. The lead platoon SEAL person or whatever. But yeah, it was I just couldn't imagine being in that house. But the other thing that's really brutal too is, the fact that, it is based on a true story, and, the closing credits just add an additional weight that this is just like another day in the life in this part of the world. And seeing a film that doesn't glorify, this level of brutality and survival, it holds a lot of weight. The other thing I really, 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 really liked was the sound design, and I can't recall any music being played, but the way that the tension was built was especially effective, especially when the conversations were coming through on the headcans at all different directions in a pretty intense, explosive scene, to the point where it was almost deafening. And I could feel my nervous system just tightening up. Just really effective filmmaking.
Well, the sound editing or the sound design, it actually is almost like an additional character in the film, because it does propel the movie forward. And to your point, there is no score. There's only the very, very clever use of effectively volume. So it goes really, really loud, and then it goes really, really soft, and it seems to be able to do it at just the right time. I mean, again, I've seen so many movies that do sound design incredibly well, and that have attempted this, and done a superb job of it. But I've never seen anything like this. I mean, like even just with the sound, and then finally, I mean, there is one song, and that's "Dancing in Blood," a song by a band called Low, right at the end, which is the most perfect way to wrap the movie up. But I mean, that scene that you just mentioned now about the radios crackling up, and there's like different feeds coming all the time. What's so fantastic about that is this moment where the soldier who's being inundated with this, these parallel messages, like switches his microphone off just so that he can, or not his headset off, just so that he can regain focus. And it almost helps you as the audience just snap back into focus again as well. The sound design very much leads your emotions or helps foster or cultivate that anxiety that you're feeling for these soldiers as you're watching them go through this.
Yeah, it did that. And, you've just reminded me there, that scene where he switches it off kind of reminds me of The Sound of Metal. Did you see that film?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Another film with fantastic sound design. But it's a great movie. There were people crying in the theater that I went to. I don't know if it was the same with you.
I was gonna ask you now, what was the response like in the theater? So my wife and I sat there literally speechless. We sat through the credits, and I was stunned to silence. I could not believe what I just seen. Multiple, you can hear, pick out different voices in the or different different versions of the same weeping in the audience. But it's not because it's particularly sad. It's just, it's such an emotional gut punch from start to finish, basically. I think by the end of it, especially with that song, I think people are almost relieved just to be done with it. And they sort of start to realize the momentousness of what they've just seen.
I would agree. And I would also say that, it's been several days since I've seen it now, and I still feel bruised by it. I'm still thinking about it. That's a mark of a really successful film to me. I did read like a few IMDb reviews after I saw it, just because I was interested to see what the general consensus was. And it was generally pretty split at the time that I'd read, where people were like, why would A24, distribute this? And, why this? It was garbage. There was no plot. And it's just like, similar to Aumicide, I guess it just went straight over your head, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I just another element of the movie that I thought was fantastic. And actually, I think as I'm discussing it now, I think this is potentially what amped up the emotional element of it, is that there is no action hero in the story. You know, in Saving Private Ryan, you had Tom Hanks, and he's fallible, and you know he has his episode at the end of the movie, but he's ultimately still, to a degree, larger than life. You have that to a point in Black Hawk Down as well, but yeah, you see the very, very real impact of what's happening on the soldiers, and you start to see how these soldiers completely, you know, some of them sort of try and snap to it and refocus. Some of them just can't deal with it because there's so much going on, and there's such, you know, they're generally speaking, very young men and quite inexperienced young soldiers. They don't know how to deal with it. The platoon, the original platoon commander, you know, has this incredible scene where, you know, that really, really hits home, and it's so understated because they never overact or overemphasize anything. Everything is just sort of the subtly stated fact. I don't know if that's the right way to articulate it.
Yeah, no, it was, and I think that there was actually a really pleasant dynamic there between the human responses in the film. It seemed that at the zenith of stress, you could kind of see people at their most authentic selves, just performing to their strengths or their weaknesses. Weaknesses completely overcame others, whereas, you know, stepping in and acting as a nurse to other people were, you know, observed in others and, you know, other strengths outside of just, you know, carrying the gun. So I thought that was really good to see, and how the directors captured those responses. But I just couldn't imagine. Being there and then.
Not. And again, having watched it, you know, there's a scene where the soldiers are on the roof, effectively trying to hold the enemy back, and I looked at that. I was like, imagine how short of a straw you needed to have pulled to have to go through this shit. Like I could not conceive of it.
I mean, the amount of adrenaline that would be pumping through your bloodstream at that point. I mean, every millisecond would feel like a minute. Yeah. I'm positive of it. You'd be seeing through walls with how high on adrenaline you would be.
Yeah.
So, whew. Yeah.
The usual, on the topic of reviews, the usual sources poo-pooed the movie. Poor review from The Independent. The Guardian didn't like it, but, you know, again, I take that from whence it comes. It doesn't take a stance on war, right or wrong. It doesn't take any sort of stance on anything. It doesn't talk about the Iraq war as being right or wrong. It just shows you what these soldiers go through. And honestly, from my perspective, I was always, you know, not to get political, but I was always against the Iraq war, and I still am. But my view has always been, if you as some fucking civilian have the gall to speak ill of a soldier and what they go through and what they put themselves through, you really can go fuck yourself. I mean, there's no, I lose immediate respect for somebody who doesn't show the appropriate level of respect to a soldier who's been on the front line in a combat zone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's, I was talking with a friend about this too. I mean, just think too about, like, would you have more respect for people that went through even more brutal wars? Like, I'd assume that you probably would too, right? Like, imagine World War One. Like, people were basically going in there with just like gas and blunt objects and just spooning people open, you know, like,
well, you think about the aftermath of the First World War. If you've seen They Shall Not Grow Old, I mean, they talk about this on the documentary, and there's many other documentaries where it's discussed too. But they returned to England and to their home countries, and they weren't welcomed as victors. They were spat at. They were banned from bars and pubs. They really were ostracized by big portions of society, and kind of cast as villains. And you think to yourself, imagine having spent 6 months in a fucking trench and having to come back and be treated that way.
Fuck me. I mean, yeah, those you know, calling it a trench is, you know, poetic. I mean, those shit-ridden rat piles is, oof. Yeah.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
So anyway, ignore what the Guardian and the Independent say. This is I'd conservatively give this a probably 11.5 out of 5 score. I suggest go and watch it while it's still in the theater, or you can catch it ideally on an IMAX screen. And then as a supplement to watching the film, check out, after you've watched obviously all 269 episodes of Into the Necrosphere, Jocko Podcast 486, because he actually speaks to Elliot Miller and Joe Hildebrand, who are two big characters in the film. The interesting thing about that podcast, because I listened to it yesterday, they actually talk about the first incident and how the soldier wasn't necessarily even hurt. They say that's what got to them so much about the whole experience. Is like he said, had they just kind of let him sit up against the wall, it would have been fine. But they still requested the evacuation for him just as a precautionary measure. And obviously it's, post the evacuation that things really go completely off the rails.
Completely off the rails, Jackie.
Very, very, very much so. And again, if you would like to feel great about the world and life, it's not the movie for you. So if you're struggling with any sort of depression or anything, if your girlfriend's just left you, don't think you're going to cheer yourself up by going to watch Warfare. And shout out to that low track, Dancing in Blood. It's absolutely phenomenal. I cranked it up on the hi-fi as soon as I got home. It was sounds magnificent. Segueing into the world of hi-fi, so I saw the Klipsch speakers there, and I know we've spoken offline about your sound setup. Yeah, what have you got over there?
So this is pretty small. I've just got the two Klipsch bookshelf speakers. These are self-powered, so I don't need a power amplifier, and they're also Bluetooth, so I can basically feed anything into the back of these. Yeah, optical. Everything. I've got my turntable on there, which just feeds directly into those as well. So it's just a really handy system for me, just kind of toggling through, TV, movies, phone, records. But I like the Klipsch. They're really, they sound really nice. I generally listen to records. I think, the convenience of Spotify is, I consume a lot of music just kind of out and about with Spotify. But when I'm at home, I like to spin records. And it's just it's a Rager. Oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher this. Is it the P3 or the R3 or something? I think it is. It's been a second since I've looked at that, but
let's have. I'll verify that because I don't have a turntable. The Plan R3.
No, it's the one sec. Let me have a look. Yeah, it's the RP3.
The RP3. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you've got and then from eyeballing them from those are the Klipsch R41 PM speakers, which are good speakers. You might want to not keep them in a shelf though, because when they stand up next to the television, the sound will be a bit clearer and a bit better.
Yeah, I'm aware. I'm an acoustical consultant by day, so so I know that I'm doing the wrong things here, but I also like the coupling of the low frequencies with the hind wall there. Yeah. So it's just more of a space thing, honestly, Jackie. It's not I haven't got an acoustically treated room, so
I'll need to fly you over so you can come and treat my room, because the problem is I've got it's about a. I'm going to be completely wrong with this. I think it's a 6x4 room. So it's a relatively square room. Okay. A little bit longer than it is wider. But obviously, as I have upgraded the theater system and the sound system, the Pantheon speakers that I have now were driven by the Diablo 333, which is fucking brutal. I mean, it's 333 watts into 8 ohms, 666 into 4. It literally, will blow a hole through a lot of other speakers. So with a subwoofer, I've got a couple of spots in this room that need that at the very least need a bass trap. So I need to just figure out how to best do it. But the plan is to, at some point, this room will be home theater only. I'll move all my shit to the place where we're sleeping now, and then that our bedroom will be turned into like a proper Into the Necrosphere studio / workspace, part-time workspace, and then we're moving into an annex that we're busy building on. Yeah, but the next big upgrade is acoustical treatment.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard controlling the low frequencies, because the low frequencies have got a longer wavelength and are, generally governed by the room modes of the geometry of the space. So we want to avoid cubes wherever we can. But for the mid to high frequencies, if you can get like a diffuser on one of those parallel walls, that's just going to help having a more diffuse, reflective sound field, and hopefully those mid to high frequencies will sound a little more enveloping. But it sounds like a great system.
Well, I did so GIK Acoustics will do like a free consultation for you if you send them a photo of the room and of your, your stuff. Now, naturally, they were going to steer me in the direction of as much as I could possibly buy from them.
Yeah.
But so what they suggested was, because there's not room for corner bass traps, what they suggested were 2 bass traps behind a bass trap behind each floor stander, and then a diffuser next to each floor stander. And then where I'm sitting right now, a diffuser on that back wall over there, and where that picture is at the back there, a diffuser as well.
Yep.
And they said that should keep most of the frequencies relatively contained. I mean, in fairness, the bass is fast enough that there's not a lot of blooming. What there is from time to time is a bit of, and it might be I don't listen to such volumes that my ears are bleeding, but there's a couple of rumbles and rattles and things that I just would otherwise prefer not to hear.
Yeah, I gotcha. I think band-based music is a little more forgiving, but if you're listening to electronic music with more like tones that were closer to pure sine tones and things, you might actually be able to find that if it was a continuous sound, you'd actually be able to walk around your room and hear, where there's more amplitude in certain parts of the room and stuff. But with a swirling of blast beats, I'm sure it's going to sound great with a few diffusers. So,
you would hope. How did you get into that racket, by the way? The
acoustics,
the acoustic game.
Yeah. Well, I was. I've been playing music for a long time, and I was involved with audio recording just naturally out of just being around studios and recording artists and stuff all the time. But I kind of got to a point in my life where I wasn't sure if I wanted to start my own studio, work for somebody else in another studio, look at post-production for film. And in thinking about all those things and thinking about, areas of my own technical development with audio engineering, I found that the biggest challenges for me was working in different spaces all the time, whether they were venues, studios. I was never used to how the room reacted, the acoustics of the room. So I went down this wormhole of just reading more and more about acoustics and short courses and ways to better inform myself about that, and became aware that Sydney, which was one state over from where I was, a city in a state, one over from where I was living, had a graduate diploma program designated just to architectural acoustics. So I thought I'd move over there and give that a crack, and I really enjoyed it, and I was able to put my credit towards a master's degree if I wanted to. So I did that. I got involved with what's called psychoacoustical research while I was at the University of Sydney. So I got to really nerd out on our perception of spatial audio, and that was amazing. But I started running out of money being a student. I was sick of being broke, and an opportunity came up as a consultant back in Melbourne So I went back to Melbourne and started my first job as an acoustical consultant. And it was a pretty toxic work environment, but, I felt like the job experience was really good for me. And, one day I just decided to quit. So I quit. It wasn't because of the work. It was just the workplace wasn't healthy. And
I'm about to say, toxic how?
Yeah, just
your boss come up behind you and lay his hand on your groin gently and
say, it was
ways to get ahead of this business.
I don't know. It's just interpersonal stuff. It was just zapping my energy. I could just feel myself just like not enjoying my job. So I quit. I had a visa for Canada, and so he asked me. I remember saying, "What are your plans?" I said, "I don't know. I'm just going to go overseas for a bit." And he's like, "What? Where?" And I said, "I'm going to go to Canada." And he said, "Have you got a job lined up?" And I said, "No." I actually think that kind of fucked him up a little more than me having other plans, because I clearly didn't like it enough that I didn't even have anything else kind of set up before I quit. And then I fell back into acoustics while I was here, and I worked for a much friendlier company. And, I've since left that company, but I've been working in acoustics for 8 or 9 years now. So it was just through music. Really,
I was gonna ask you about your travels, because we've kind of both we've both moved, left our hometowns, and in search of fame and fortune. But I mean, normally normally Australians kind of go the same route as South Africans. We all converge in Putney in London, Wimbledon or Putney, and then some of us stay, some of us leave. Did you ever come to the UK? Did you do a working holiday?
I've never done. I've never been to UK. I've never been to Europe. My family's Lithuanian, so a dream of mine is to make it to Lithuania with a guitar on my back. And if that hasn't happened by the time I'm 40, I'm just paying for a flight and getting there to do it anyways. But no, I haven't been there. But countries that part of the Commonwealth inherently have an easier time with the working holiday visas. So, the UK, South Africa, Canada are a lot easier. At a certain age, you basically just apply and you're basically just approved. So yeah, it's not through lack of me not wanting to get to the UK. It's And honestly, I never expected to really be in Canada. I applied for the working holiday visa at the time that I did as a contingency, because I was in a relationship with somebody who was residing. Well, her family was stateside, and we'd been dividing our time between North America and Australia, and I just wanted to be closer to her at that time. We separated, but I still had the working holiday visa. So when I quit my job, it was like, well, I've got 6 months left to use this. If I wanted, I may as well. So it was just kind of jumping through, unexpected hoops and kind of landing where I did. But from what I've heard from the Australians that went to the UK, it was quite a tough place to live. But then I would say the same thing about Canada to Australians as well. And I don't know if it's just Australia is just such an easier place to live compared to most other places that people live in, and you don't really become aware of that until you've had to start from nothing in another country and build everything up from scratch. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I've never been to Australia, but I do have many friends there. My impression of it is the quality of life is so much higher than the UK, and most likely so much higher than Canada. I think that it's very, very jarring, and I suspect it's potentially why there are fewer Australians coming to the UK, because for the same price, I think, as what you would pay for a shitty little 1-bed flat in a place like Putney, you could probably live in a very nicely decked out 3-bed, 4-bed house in a reasonable neighborhood in Melbourne, not Sydney, but Melbourne for sure.
I mean, Melbourne's getting a lot more expensive, and I've heard that it's really not the same magical place as it was when I left. But the things that I miss most, like, yes, the livability is one aspect of it, but people really don't understand like how different cultures can be. The thing that I love about Australians is people express how they feel. In Canada, it's been extremely difficult for me to acclimate because there's a passive aggressive non-verbal language that happens, particularly between males. So if there's an item that should really honestly be discussed and sorted out, it's usually played on this like non-spoken board game of passive aggressive actions, which just completely and utterly infuriates me and is just a complete waste of time and energy. Whereas in Australia, you, generally speaking, at least in my circles that I was involved with, you knew exactly how another person felt about you at any given time. And that makes navigating all social circles so much easier. There's no tips in Australia, so that's a huge thing. And the sun, I think people kind of forget how healthy it is to have much longer summers, and the unique echo chamber that is the music and art scene in Australia. That is so separated from the rest of the world that it just feels like artists have just got a much more unique and independent voice through whatever medium it is that they're speaking through. So
I was going to say to you, if you listen to this podcast, then you know that it's boom time in Australia right now when it comes to the metal scene there, generally speaking.
It always has been. It always has been. The only issue, the issue has been that it's only been up until recently that there have been more bands breaking out of Australia. And it's not just touring, but just the internet, just having the internet around for people to access these bands has just done wonders. But there are so many bands that, had you have picked them up out of Melbourne or Adelaide or Sydney or Brisbane or Perth, wherever they were from in the 90s, and said, okay, here you are in LA or Chicago or New York or Seattle even, and change nothing else, I genuinely feel like a lot of the bands that should have been bigger from Australia would have been bigger.
That was the point that I made many years ago on the show about Alchemist. I'd seen Alchemist open for, I can't even remember who it was in the UK. And I remember it was a tiny venue. It's called the Garage. I said tiny. It's probably about 400 to 500 people when it's packed out. But I'm sitting there watching them play, and I kept thinking to myself, this band should be filling up arenas. Massive. They have got such a huge, like, engulfing sound and such a presence on stage. Like, it is only for the fact that they're based out of Australia that they were not one of the biggest bands in metal. Like, I feel so strongly about that. I think they could have been maybe not Metallica level, because few could be, but they could certainly have been on a level of like an Anthrax or a Megadeth. I really do. Had the right person signed them, and they were based in the right place, and they had come along at the right time, that band could have been enormous.
Yeah, and there's other bands too. I mean, like if Sadistic Execution, released their material instead of sitting on it for, what was it, 2 to 3 years, they would have, I'm pretty sure if my dates are right, may have had Morbid Angel, cornered for timing. My biggest band that I get most frustrated about is a band called Damaged, and I'm sure that you're familiar with, Matty Skitz, the drummer who's been in quite a legendary list of bands. But Damaged they were around when Alchemist were around. They never broke out of Australia, but they are such a timeless, unique band. Even now, that it actually blows my mind every time that I revisit these records from them, which to me are like certified classics and are also certified classics to other Australians in the know. But it is just such an injustice that band was not bigger, and I feel that they would have completely changed the trajectory of people's perception of mixing genres, of grindcore and death metal and black metal, and just the way that they rolled it all up into one was just so far ahead of the time. As I said, it genuinely blows my mind. And I recently had a sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say you're absolutely correct about Matty playing in a lot of fucking tier 1 bands. Bremelin, Hobbs Angel of Death, the mighty Destroyer 666, Atomizer, Bloodduster, Cemetery Urn. He was a live drummer for Sadistic Execution. I mean, fucking anyone who's anyone, he played drums with.
Yeah. So some friends of mine, they also have a fantastic podcast called Riff Worship. Asked me. I'm gonna
bleep that out. I'm only teasing.
Sure. To do an album retrospective, and I said let's do Damage Purified in Pain, and there's not much information that was archived online, unfortunately. So we reached out to Matty, and we had quite a comprehensive interview with him, and it's going to be nice for me to be able to talk at length with a musician that had such a monumental influence on my own musical trajectory. But this is just one way of saying to everybody, like, go and check out Damaged. Their oeuvre of work is exquisite. They don't miss. Everything available from them to listen to is amazing. And their later record, the last record, actually featured Kevin Sharp of Brittle Truth on vocals, which is also wild for me to consider. Didn't put more of a spotlight on them at that time. But Australian bands, man, there's no bands like Australian bands, and there's just something about that place and their metal that is just better than the rest. I think,
it's the off-axis songwriting style. That's how I've described it. They could be writing a death metal song, or they could be writing a black metal song, but they always do it in a way that's just 10 degrees off axis. It's just a little bit different and a little bit more unique than anything else that you'll hear.
But isn't that like the hardest shit that you can do as a composer?
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. So, I don't want to say, every band's taking like huge risks, but it just seems like most Australian bands, like, they just don't care. And it just comes across like they just don't care what people think. And that makes me want to listen to it even more,
By the way, on Kevin Sharp, I've had him on the podcast twice, and for some bizarre reason, the first time I had him on, I thought, man, this is the day that this podcast year-over-year subscriber numbers are really going to spike up. And for some reason, they don't.
Yeah,
he doesn't seem to be, because I'm exactly the same as you. I used to think this dude is massive.
Yeah.
The episodes haven't done too badly, but I mean, they certainly haven't been in the best performing episodes ever. That's been a weird thing for me doing this show. It's certain episodes will just absolutely take off, and then certain artists you'll get on and fucking next to nobody will check it out. And you go like, how's that possible? Like, in my mind, Kevin Sharp is an absolute legend. I mean, Venomous Concept, fantastic. Lockup, fucking genius. I mean, let's not even start on Brutal Truth. If you're not into Extreme Conditions and Need to Control, then you probably weren't around at the time that they came out, because I don't know a single person that wasn't fucking freaking out about those two records.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, at least you got to chat to him. I really wanted to chat with him just to kind of get his perspective on what it was like to travel from Chicago to Melbourne to record with, an Australian death metal, grindcore, whatever you want to call it, band at the time where Rotten Records were helping fund it all, and just kind of get a glimpse into that, that time and place. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. So, Kevin, if you're listening, I'm curious to pick your brain about what
I highly doubt he listens, but it's
Yeah.
if I ever get him back on, I'll let him know. I got on really well with him, but both times that he was on, the first time he was in his car and it was midway through COVID, and you could just tell the dude was fed up with life. And the second time I had him on, he was also in his car, but he had been having dinner with friends and was clearly had a few shandies. So the effects had been starting to show. But yeah, no, as I said, I always thought he was I thought he was a good dude, and I always thought he was a much bigger, more prolific guest to have on. But clearly I was wrong. But on the topic of just modern Australian metal and the great bands, I mean, Werewolves, Drugoth, Gravier, Ruins. Ruins, I haven't made an album for a while, but eventually I'll beat the drum loudly enough for fucking Dave Haley to hear.
Yeah, it's
for them to do it.
Alex is the guy behind Ruins. They've obviously got a full life band and stuff, but we used to play with Ruins like quite a lot with a band I was in back in the day, and Psychroptic as well. And I used to ask Dave, like, what is the plan with Ruins? Is it just to play Australia over and over and over again, or is it world domination? And he clearly said to me that Alex's intentions were world domination, but Dave Haley's were different, and that was at that time. So I don't know.
Dave's was we're going to play Tasmania over and over. That's it. As long as it's within a 5-mile radius from my house, I'm more than happy to tour that section of Australia.
But I don't know what happened with Alex. I saw him at a few shows. He came up. I actually saw him at an Abremlin show at their reunion shows, and he came up from Tassie for that. I don't know. I don't know if he's doing something else or what. But yeah, Ruins are a fantastic band, and it would be really good to hear more from them.
Just my Dave Haley story. Way before I'd ever met him, I massively got into Ocassus, the first Amenta album, and I love everything that the Amenta have done.
Great band.
I remember when I heard Ocassus for the first time, it's just mind blown. But they list him on the CD as Diazonon. And so I'm on the internet, like searching Diazonon drum machine, trying to find what's this brand of drum machine? I've never heard of it before. And I remember talking to Eric and saying, do you guys have an actual drummer that you use? And he's like, yes, Dave is. I said I mentioned to him I've been looking up Diazonon drum machines, and he's like, no, his name is Dave, and he's very human, I can assure you. But holy fuck, he to me is one of the best drummers, bar none. Like, if you throw every single legend at it that you want to, he stands. He's in the upper tier.
Yeah, and he's incredibly business savvy as well, and he's managed to. He prides himself on saying that he's never had to work a real job, and it's like, yeah, but Dave, like, you work harder than anybody I know as well. So hats off to Dave. He's a true icon, not just in the bands that he's playing with, but the bands that he's brought down to Australia and helped abroad as well. But yeah, he's nuts. So's his brother. He's crazy. And I guess it is cool actually to think that Amenta record sounds, it's Dave playing, but it sounds so industrial compared to his other performances. It'd be nice to have some more insight into how those studio sessions went and whether they were cleaned up or resampled, or how that was all kind of coming together. But yeah, what are some other Australian bands? There's Disentomb is another brutal death metal band that were doing great things for the style as well. They've kind of eased back into a lower gear at the moment, but just to think about how small a town it was where they came from, and they were playing such just brutal, guttural death metal, for them to be playing the tours and the fests and things that they did, cannot be understated as well. And then you've got the huge bands too. And, although it's not my style, I mean, bands like I Killed the Prom Queen and Thy Art Is Murder. And, these bands came from these small little towns. And, if it wasn't Sydney, it was like these little beach towns. And you kind of got to respect the story to stardom, right?
Yeah, you can. Parkway Drive and the like, not my tempo.
No, it's.
But I do agree with you. You can definitely respect. You can definitely respect the story. By the way, you're just talking about like guys in the scene that are legends. I have to give a shout out, first of all, obviously to the Werewolves guys. They get shout outs on this podcast on an almost weekly basis, so they know I love them greatly. But Jason Pepiat, a fucking man's man and a champion's champion. Yeah. And also, because I know he listens to the podcast, you will notice, Jason, that I have not yet spoken about Sinister. So potentially the first episode of 2025 where Sinister isn't brought up as a standing topic of conversation.
Yeah, Pepe's he's a really nice guy. I think I first met him again with the same band I was referring to before. We were playing shows off the Symbols of Failure release shows at a place called the Espy Hotel in St Kilda. This is just for Pepe. Everybody else that's listening to this is not for you. This is for Pepe.
Keep on for the next 3 minutes.
But we were playing. We were called the Ocularis Infernum, and I remember playing, and Jason's face as we were playing was so expressive. I don't know if he's. If he's normally like that, but he was so enthusiastic about our music, and we were so young. Like we were so young, and it was really, really, really cool for us at that time. We had placed Psychroptic on, the best of the best, and to have those guys be as cool as they were to us, straight out of the gate, was incredibly encouraging for us as musicians and stuff. So, yeah, Pepe and all the guys from Tasmania that I've met have always been just the nicest people, just genuinely just the nicest people. Yeah, it's cool. I miss it very much.
Now, this is good. Was going to be my question. When you speak of Australia, you've got so much pride.
Yeah, and
you sound so you sound homesick.
Oh, like,
do you see yourself as you don't see yourself as a Canadian, surely?
That's a tricky one. I mean, like, I have a life here, I do miss home a lot, but maybe this is something that you can relate with, but just the idea of just packing up my life and it wouldn't be starting from scratch again, but I would miss so much about my life here. And, it's music and it's my career that I really enjoy here. And, that's part of me. Like that would be rebuilt, anywhere that I am. It wouldn't necessarily even have to be Australia, but I just don't feel that the time for me is up. There's still more Atrae Bilis to write, and there's still parts of my spirit that I'm trying to figure out before I return back home. This leaving home was, in most ways, an opportunity for me to find myself again and become like a better version of myself before I left. And I still feel like there's some tweaks and some adjustments that I can make to that. But I do worry that if I return, I'm not going to want to come back as well. And that's just an internalization that I grapple with. So, I don't know, how does it feel for you? Like, do you feel at home where you're at, or does it get better with time?
Not at all. I've been living here for 23 years now, and I've said it before, I will never feel like a feel English. I'm in my heart of hearts, I'm South African. And when I get out of the plane, and I go there every single year, the day I get out of the plane in Cape Town and I breathe that Cape Town air, I feel completely at home. And I never feel as great as I do for the 4 or 5 weeks that I'm in Cape Town, or that I'm in the Western Cape area. And I'm kind of, I'm just kind of basking in the sunshine and basking in the glory of the motherland. Problem in South Africa is, we genuinely are kind of, we're a displaced people in South Africa. Like I've got a good, very good career here now. I've got my daughter here. I'm married. Between my wife and I, we've got quite a life here. Least of all, all of our animals and stuff like that. We couldn't take them back, and the opportunities in South Africa, thanks to the government that has mismanaged and wrecked the place over the course of the last 30 years, it's just non-existent. And that's not, South Africa's got such a complicated backstory and such a complicated history that it would be several podcasts to actually properly unpack and explain it all. But I mean, safe to say, it's just not moving back there is not an option. If things stay as on the trajectory that it is right now, then I dread to think it, but I think going on a holiday there is gonna cease to be an option.
Wow.
So I enjoy it, and I think maybe that's why I love it so much, or why I feel so exhilarated whenever I'm there, because in my mind I'm constantly reminding myself, like, this could very well come to an end.
Wow.
So enjoy every second that you can. Yeah, but yeah, no, I still get emotional when the Springboks play rugby, when the national anthem is playing. I stand up with my hand on my chest. I will never not be a South African. So,
yeah. No
matter where in the world I end up.
Yeah. I don't think there's any perfect place to live. And there's definitely aspects of Australia that I think, I don't remember, to be too fond of. But I also feel like there's a golden age for most places that you live. I feel that maybe I was fortunate enough to live in Melbourne at the greatest time that Melbourne was Melbourne. And, there may be another time like that. But I know that here in Vancouver anyways, at least to the locals, it seems like there was a time where Vancouver was the greatest place on earth, but it's just not now, So I could go back and I could find a lot of closure in that. It's not the home that I remembered. But we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that chapter when I get there. Unfortunately, I'm just too busy doing this music thing back here that it's hard to.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to just up sticks and fuck off back home. But I think you are correct about the golden age. It feels like the golden age in an awful lot of places is done. I know I came to the UK right at the tail end of the good times. Post the 2008 financial crash, everything started to change. Like all the great venues started to shut down, and everything started to get gentrified. And we've had one of, and certainly in London, fortunately I don't live there anymore, but we've had one after the other fucking imbecile mayor run the place. Similar to the government, we've had government after government just further run the country further into the ground. So yeah, that kind of seems to be the way in most places. My comment on Australia would definitely be, in the job I do, I manage global teams, and doing this podcast, I speak to people all over the world. The bands and the friends I've made in Australia, the general impression I get of Australia is there is exceptionally high caliber, high quality people that come from Australia. And the fact that I can meet so many of them and instantly hit it off, and instantly you can speak with a degree of comfortability like you've been friends for years. And this podcast has been this way. We've been going for an hour and a half, excluding all of our false starts. And it's, again, I can reel down the list. Chris from Destructor was most recent. I could I felt
Lovely
like
guy.
I'd known the guy for fucking ages.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that I love the most about people that I meet from Australia. They just seem like you guys just seem like my kind of people, my kind of person.
Yeah, I think we feel the same way actually about a lot of people, especially the British. I can't comment on the South African isms there, but I would certainly say that it's it's pretty widely known around the world that Brits and Aussies just get along like a house on fire. It's the same humor, So there's also something to be said to that. But Chris is also just such a fucking nice guy.
Brilliant dude, tier one dude.
Yeah.
So we've gotten very existential here, which is a nice segue into wrapping up with perhaps the most existential question of them all.
Sure.
I saw a photo of you with long hair.
Oh,
and the clean-cut young man that I see before me is very different. It's a very different vision to what I was expecting. When did the moustache happen, and when did this beautiful side parting come into being?
Oh, I don't know. I'm thinking I probably cut my long hair anyways. I'm guessing around 2012, 2013. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. And I'm placing that by photos that I remember, from travels and things. But I it's been so long I haven't thought about it. And the moustache, I feel like I've always had the moustache. Just it's a little longer some days and a little shorter other days, but it feels very weird when it's not on.
Dude, it's like my beard. I had to shave my beard for work in the 2000s. I shudder to watch even to see those photos because it's fucking horrific.
It is crazy how much younger that we all look when we shave it though. Like I feel like I drop 5 to 10 years when I take just the moustache off.
You get asked for ID when you're buying booze.
That's it.
So, dude, final thing before you go, any plans on the Atrae Bilis front? I mean, you guys are going to surely be striking while the iron is hot. With new material. Like, what's on the roadmap for you guys right now?
Yeah, so we got a few shows coming up across Canada. We've been kind of neglecting Canada a lot, which not proud to say because we're in our own backyard.
Canada has, Canadians have a lot to be pissed off about. I need to get out on the road with my friends in Panzerfaust and
that'd be great.
Make some racket.
Yeah. So we have a couple of rural shows in BC coming up. I should probably be plugging these. I think it's May 8 or 9 or something around there. We're doing Kamloops and Kelowna. And then we were invited out to Manitoba Metal Fest this year. So we'll be flying out to the great lands of Winnipeg and hopefully we survive that. I've heard it's a pretty rough town, but the fest is going to be great. It's a 2-day fest with, Atheist and Sanguisugabog, and it's going to be a good one. So looking forward to getting out there and making some new friends and enjoying the other bands. And then we have made a conscious decision to lock ourselves away and finish writing LP number 3. We've written about half of it at the moment, but when we're touring, we lose our steam with the creative flow, and it's, as you can imagine, these we like to be uninterrupted as these songs kind of take shape. So we're prioritizing writing that, and then we'll book a studio for pre-production and make sure that we've got a studio set aside for the actual tracking, because sometimes you need to wait anywhere between 12 and 18, 24 months sometimes, depending on the producer and the studio that you want to work with. So just want to make sure that we got all that locked down so there's no delays for LP3. And hopefully our US work permits are processed within the window that the US government is telling us that they will be, because we'd like to be playing more shows, but the climate's quite shaky at the moment. So,
well, mate, with that moustache, I mean, if I were part of ICE, I'd be lubing up the locks to the handcuffs. No, I'm only teasing. Well, mate, what an absolute pleasure. I know we've been going back and forth on wanting to get this done for a while now, and I feel like it's the first of many. So great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks.
Finally, nice timing too. We were able to talk about Warfare.
Yes, go see it, everybody. It's
go see it and listen to Atrae Bilis. Keep it real on the street, my man. I'll see you soon.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jackie.
You just heard To Snuff the Spirit Guides by Atrae Bilis. That is taken from their sophomore album, Aumicide, available right now on 20 Buck Spin. Massive thank you to David for his time. What a great dude, and how great catching up with him. I did mention that was long overdue. We've gone back and forth for the better part of about 6 months talking about getting him on the show. And clearly we had a lot of things to say to each other. So you can expect him to be on the podcast again at some point down the road. And just as a side note, I've spoken about it on the news rant. I spoke about it at length in this episode. Make sure you watch Warfare by Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza, the best movie of 2025, bar none. As always, my friends, I will post a link to the Atrae Bilis Bandcamp in the description to the podcast. So head over there, buy yourself some music if you like what you heard. I don't make any money from this, just so you guys know. It is simply just to, let the bands who come on the show know that when they're on here, the Legion is fully engaged and will show their support. And you guys do have a bit of a reputation for this. I was talking to my good friend Katie Irizarry the other day, and it was actually a very well-known thing apparently around the Season of Mist offices that when a band comes on into the Necrosphere, they see an uptick in sales almost immediately thereafter. So that has helped the show massively, and I'm obviously very appreciative of it to you guys, and I love the fact that I can introduce you to some new music. Now, speaking of introducing you to some new music, about 2 years ago, I introduced you to Conspiracy X, yet another brainchild from the mangled mind owned by the great Matt Brizzo. Matt Brizzo, of course, is also in Sick. He's in Spells of Torment. He's been on the podcast multiple times, both helping me co-host the news rant and as a guest. He is a fucking brilliant dude, a very good friend of mine. And Conspiracy X is potentially one of his most interesting projects. They are about to put out a new EP called Blood Aggression. And for the very first time in the world ever, you get to hear their new single, another premiere on the Sphere. This is Bloodstained Eyes. No less than 2 premieres on the Sphere this week. That was a track called Bloodstained Eyes, taken from the forthcoming EP Blood Aggression by Conspiracy X. It is due for release on May the 23rd. I will post the Conspiracy X Bandcamp in the description to the podcast. I don't believe there's a pre-order link up yet, but when there is, you avail yourself of it, and Matt Prizzo will almost certainly be on the show, either as a guest or as a co-host of the News Rant. It is always so much fun catching up with him. I know he's got a few other things up his sleeve as well, so maybe when he comes back on the show, he can give us a little update on what else he has in store for us in 2025. But great track, and thank you to him for choosing Into the Necrosphere to host the first ever airing of that song. Right now, my friends, if you watched the trailer to Predator Badlands and thought to yourself, wow, I really love the design of the new Predator, I'm going to have to question your eyesight as well as your mental stability. And of course, I'm going to have to let you know that it's time to hit the bricks, because this is my weekly news rant.
Round them up for judgment. And hang them where the world can see.
All right, my friends, this week I'm not even going to start with music. We're just going to dive straight into the questions. And the first question that I'm answering this week, sent to me by a member of the Legion, Grind Your Mind 77, asks, do you think Metallica should swallow their pride and do a first 4 album only tour? I think they play probably at least about 60 to 70% of their set list currently is mostly taken from the first 4 albums. I might be wrong, but I would suggest that there's a relative chunk of what they play right now that comes off the early records. I don't see them ever doing it. I mean, I think that I get that after you've played those songs for 30 years plus, they must get pretty boring. I remember reading Kerry King saying how much he hated playing Angel of Death, and I get it. If you've played that song over and over again every single night, you must tire of it. But I mean, if they did that in a hypothetical scenario, I would most definitely be down with seeing it. Will they do it as well as they did it in 1986? Absolutely not. But, at the very least, it would be entertaining, and it would be a whole damn sight better than them playing music off of the last 3 albums, all 3 of which I thought were fucking total shite. Okay, let's move on to some music. And our first song we're listening to this week is a new track by This Ending. This Ending have been around since 2006. Their last album, Needles of Rust, I actually didn't mind, even though I'm not the biggest fan of melodic death metal. But either way, it says here, for the first time ever, This Ending released a song in Swedish called Mörkrets Vungar. The latter comes off the 7-inch vinyl, The Plague Angel 20th Anniversary EP. This release marks the celebration of This Ending's first demo of Let the World Burn that was released 20 years ago. So, right, let's give this one a spin. Boring as fuck. I mean, I don't really like twin guitar melodies very much. There's very few bands that can pull it off properly. 8 out of 10 times, a twin guitar Iron Maiden style melody, that sort of, people get all fucking moist about that. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the quickest way to bring the testosterone levels in a song down by at least 90%. You've never in your entire life come across a band or seen a band where you go, yeah, that breakdown where the crowd went fucking absolutely ballistic, that's when they did the twin guitar melodies. Never. So I don't really like it. Like I said, it works for some bands. Like The Haunted do it quite well. Actually, Trivax do it pretty well sometimes. So there are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, I can't stand it. And that song is just dull as fuck. The only thing that they've got going for them is the drummer. But then, again, you have to question how much of that is studio trickery, because the production of the song is so overly polished. It just lacks menace, it lacks threat, it lacks danger, and it lacks really anything that I find interesting whatsoever. Moving on. Now, I'm going to probably fuck up the pronunciation of this band, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. Atrae out of Brazil have unleashed a brand new single called Death Force. It says here, Brazilian extreme metal force Atrae have unleashed Death Tour, the crushing first single. Is it Death Tour or Death Force? Again, standards at metalstorm.net are most definitely slipping. It says here, the crushing first single from their upcoming album, Serpent's Verdict. It lands in stores on June the 6th, 2025 through Wormhole Death Records. It was recorded at Studio Satori, mixed by Diego Santiago and mastered by Dan Swano. For once, I can't actually be sarcastic and say the great Dan Swano, because he is legitimately great. Let's hear what this one sounds like. So on the plus side, this is definitely better than this ending. But it is, they're from Brazil, but they're no Chrysian, and they're certainly no Rebellion. It's not bad. I think the mixing and mastering is actually probably one of the best features of the song. I quite like the vocals of Jamie Veron as well. Even though Jamie Veron on the music video deemed it fit to parade around without a shirt when he is definitely not in the position to be doing so. I think, there's a lot of shirtless parading when it comes to metal music videos, and an awful lot of these dudes really shouldn't be doing it. When you're that flabby that when you lift your arms up, there's noticeable jiggle. And I, include myself here. I wouldn't be fucking running around without a shirt on in a music video either. But if there's noticeable jiggle, you need to spend at least six to 8 months in the gym before you shoot a music video. So that aside, yeah, again, the song's pretty generic. It's infinitely forgettable, and it's not something that is going to feature very high up on my radar. And these guys have been around for a long time now. They were formed in 1998. They've been together as a band under the name Cursed Celebration since 1994. If they were going to release anything that was any good, they would have done so ages ago. Now, I did actually have a question that ties in quite nicely to this, and it was specifically around gym playlists. Let me just pull that up here, and I can let you guys know the question. So Peter Herbert, found on Instagram as Ferbert74, he asks, Jackie, I hope you're well. If you had to make a top 10 ultimate playlist for the gym, which songs would you choose? I recall you mentioning Stamping Ground, Pain is Weakness, Leaving the Body. That, of course, is a phenomenal song for going to the gym. However, I have spent a couple of weeks mulling over Peter's question, and I've taken things one step further. If you bear with me just a second, I'm gonna flick my fingers and bring up something a little bit special that I created especially for the Legion. Behold, friends, my brand new Spotify playlist entitled Pain is Weakness, the sequel. Currently, 108 songs and or 6 hours and 23 minutes of music that is guaranteed to up your testosterone levels by at least 80%, increase your reps by at least 50%, and turn you into a fucking man's man. Or get you shapely and bikini ready if you're a woman. Going back to my days of selling Time Life CDs on the phone, which, believe it or not, I used to do back in 2003. Yeah, 2003, 2004. I used to be one of those fucking irritating cunts that call people up at 8 at night and go, hello, my name is Jackie from Time Life Music, the company that brought you the sounds of the 60s music series. Do you still remember that, sir? I still remember my entire fucking script, so I'm not going to bore you guys with that. But, you know, channeling the spirit of those fucking well and truly happily behind me days, Pain is Weakness, the sequel, features such artists as Obituary, Malevolent Creation, Demolition Hammer, Cryptopsy, Suffocation, Slayer, Dark Angel, Forbidden, Toxic Holocaust, DRI, Hyrax, Agnostic Front, The Exploited, Sick of It All, Cro-Mags, Judge, Deicide, and many others. And best of all, my friends, I will be posting a link to this in the description to the podcast, so if you decide that you no longer want to be a pussy and you're going to start going to the gym and training hard every single day of your life, then this is the playlist for you to check out. I will also be adding songs routinely to it because I use it in my own workouts, and of course, if you have any songs that you would like to add, then you just drop them in the comments, and I'll give them due consideration. All I ask is limited use of clean singing, no fucking snorecore, no sleep token, no Lorna snore, no fucking, I was trying to think what bands of a boat, and there's probably a list that as long as my arm that I don't want on here. I mean, Evanescence, none of that sort of stuff is welcome on a fucking man's workout list. But yeah, you guys check that out. You let me know what you think. There's enough here to keep you all to keep you fired up and ready to kill for fucking years to come. And like I said, I will continue to update this periodically over the coming weeks. Now, the next question, and one I really loved, I had a question from frequent question asker, Kelu666. He asks, what unpopular takes or opinions do you have on the metal scene? And he says I can talk about specifically artists, bands, albums, or genres. Now, I have plenty. Many of them I have already shared on the news rant, but I'll give you guys a couple that maybe I haven't shared so openly. And then, yeah, you guys can hate me, unsubscribe, do whatever you deem fit with it. So I'll give you 4. Number 1. If I were given the choice between listening to either the entire Iron Maiden discography for the rest of my life or listening only to Discharge's Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing, then I would choose Discharge every day of the week and twice on Sunday. As a matter of fact, I'd go one step further, and this is not because I hate Iron Maiden. This is because I am mostly indifferent to their music, and I find Discharge to be way better, way spicier. It's just music that sparks a reaction in me that Iron Maiden does not. I would listen to the song, The Final Bloodbath, off that record before I listen to any single thing on Iron Maiden, if given the choice for the rest of my life. So that's one take. Take number 2. I've mentioned this before. I actually enjoyed The Unspoken King by Cryptopsy. Take number 3. I think that Behemoth's The Satanist is mediocre trash and signaled the beginning of their very rapid decline. And by the way, that decline has not shifted. The previous 2 albums were dreck. I had some degree of retained affinity for the band because of how much I love the earlier stuff, but in hindsight, total muck. And then take number 4, I find Blood Incantation to be excruciatingly boring. I have tried over and over and over again to get into their music because a lot of you guys speak extremely highly of them. I know the album that they put out last year, and the name escapes me, Absolute Elsewhere, I'm just checking now. It was all over the best of lists of 2024. I tried, I could not get past the middle of the second song. I just find it to be excruciatingly boring. So there you go. My bad takes on metal. No doubt if you follow the news rant until the very end, I may probably throw out a couple more. So, yeah, just saying, I calls it as I sees it over here on the news rant. Moving on, my friends. Pandemia have unleashed a brand new single. It says here, the Czech death metal veterans Pandemia have unleashed Blessed Oblivion, the third and final single from their upcoming album Darkened Devotion, and it arrives to us on May the 16th via Hammerheart Records. The accompanying video clip was directed and edited by Pavel Brilla. Let's hear what it sounds like. That is definitely way more interesting than either this ending or a Feelatry or whatever the fuck they're called that we heard previously. Good vocals, great drummer, some fucking sick grooving on that part that we just paused there. Real nasty, manly shit. I like the production, and I'll tell you what else I really like. The verse, they kind of hit you from left field with a melody that you don't quite expect. It's not traditional melodic death metal. It's not blackened death metal either. It's just something that sounds within the narrow confines of the style that they're playing, and it just sounds quite unique and quite interesting. So thumbs up from me. I think this is really good. Very surprisingly so. I don't know whether we missed the previous 2 singles. Clearly we have, because I would have remembered it. But Pandemia, I will most definitely be keeping on my radar. Good work. Right, Spiral Skies unveil their cover for Black Sabbath's track Born Again. Maybe that's another bad take. I don't really give a shit about the Black Sabbath final show. And I also much prefer Dio era Sabbath over Ozzy era Sabbath. So there's two bad takes for you. But I'm going to listen to this just purely because we're going to be gifted with an avalanche of Sabbath news probably over the next 3-4 months. Most likely a bunch of covers as well. So we may as well give this one a listen. And it is from a great Black Sabbath album. I love Born Again. It says here, Swedish psychedelic rockers Spiral Skies have presented their rendition of the Black Sabbath track Born Again. It appears on the same titled record from 1983.
As you look through my window, deep into my room, the tapestries all faded, the vague and distant glories concealed in the gloom. The eyes and fingers so full of God and passion, softly brushing my lips at the tips of my primitive soul. As you look through my door, deep into my room, can't you feel the mighty heart? It's waiting and waiting in the glow. Our distant shadows so forgotten champions, those who live and be still, and will rise when we challenge and kill. Born again, you've been born again.
Yeah, not too bad. I mean, I didn't expect, a masterpiece, but I think Frida is not a bad vocalist. Very nice, very crisp, clean, clear production on her voice, on all of the instruments. That bass comes out, sounds really, really nice. I tell you what, this actually reminds me of a little bit. When you go to hi-fi shows, you tend to hear an awful lot of like audiophile grade covers. There's some fucking obscure singer somewhere that goes into a studio and they spend millions to make them sound as fantastic as possible, so that when you listen to them on a sound system that costs nearly $1 million, it sounds extra brilliant. You can hear every single scrape of the fucking guitar string, every brush across the snare drum, blah blah blah. She actually reminds me a little bit of some of those audiophile singers. In fact, this whole song reminds me a bit of that. It reminds me of like one of those audiophile covers that you would hear. And maybe just because I enjoy going to hi-fi shows, I enjoy the experience of hearing incredible sound equipment, as you guys know. I have a little bit of a soft spot for this. I'm not familiar with anything else that Spiral Skies has done. It is psychedelic doom rock, not my tempo by any stretch of the imagination. But if you're gonna cover anything sung by Ronnie James Dio, you best have your fucking, you best have your I was about to say your fighting boots on. I don't think that makes any sense. But you best do your homework. You need to know what the fuck you're doing. And I think that she's given a good account of herself there. All right, Onslaught have dropped a new version of 1989's In Search of Sanity. Here's another take for you guys. I've never been a big fan of Onslaught. I have seen them live twice. Both times I was bored to tears. So bad. One of the times I just went and stood outside until it ended. They were opening for Obituary at the time. But they are always a band that I've been interested to be proven wrong on, if that makes sense, because I hear a lot of people talk about them and sing their praises to the fucking heavens. And so, you know, when I heard as an example that they're putting out a new album, I was like, okay, well, maybe the new album comes out and it grabs me, it hits me a little different. Anyway, it says here, British veterans Onslaught have shared a music video for the re-recorded version of the song In Search of Sanity. The latter serves as the title track of the band's upcoming music output, which is ready to come out on May the 23rd. Guitarist and founding member Nigel Rockett opens up about the song's return. We'll read what he has to say about that after we've heard the first 90 seconds or so. So let's hit it. I'm still not convinced, I'm afraid. You know, when it comes to vintage thrash from, you know, this came out in 1989, I think, In Search of Sanity. So when it comes to vintage thrash from that era, you can give me Forbidden Evil, the first Sacred Reich album, Testament, Demolition Hammer. There's so many things I would rather listen to than this. This just sounds to me... I don't know how to describe. I don't know quite how to articulate what it is about it that I don't like. It just sounds too accessible and not rough and tough enough. I know there was a massive deal made on the socials about their previous vocalist. I think his name was Cy Keeler leaving the band. This new bloke, David Garnett, doesn't sound too bad, but again, yeah, this isn't the kind of thrash that I think is best of the best. It's not as dreadful as Machine Head, whose new single will just give a wide skip, but it can't. It's just not. It's not something that is. Maybe the day comes that I pull back on my words on this, and we've been here on the news rant where I've put my hands up and I said I was wrong about Band X. I was wrong about Watain. I was wrong about Dark Funeral, particularly in light of their last two records. But Onslaught, I'm still in the detractor camp as far as they're concerned. Celestial Sanctuary released a new track, and by the way, I know I've skipped Nigel's description of the song, but well, there's no point in reading that based on how I feel about it. UK death metal outfit Celestial Sanctuary have recently reissued their Visions of Stagnant Blood EP through their new label Metal Blade Records. The re-release includes an additional track entitled Choking on the Rotten Seed, for which the band has just premiered a new music video directed by Tom Cronin. Let's give it a whirl. Never seen these guys live, but I can tell you, I think this would go down a fucking storm in the right venue with the right level of performance. Certainly judging by the video footage that I see there, these blokes have plenty of energy. Vocalist, guitarist Tom Cronin comments of this song, the idea behind the video was to introduce ourselves to, and what we're about to people who haven't heard our band yet, and there's a lot of people out there who haven't got a fucking clue who we are. Stylistically, we really just wanted to capture that feeling of discovering your new favorite band on Headbangers Ball at 2 a.m. I'm down with that idea. They put out their previous album on Church Road Records. That album was called Insatiable Thirst for Torment, and I did talk about them on the News Rant when that record came out. Was not one of my favorite albums of 2023, but certainly in the list of contenders. It's very, very good. And so is the song. I also like the fact that they've not fucking bitched out since they've joined Metal Blade Records, because that is always a threat when any band signs to a bigger label, especially for some bizarre reason whenever a band signs to Metal Blade. So, right, let's answer some more questions. Jota Nig asks, what bands are keeping the metal world fresh and alive? There's two ways in which I can answer this question. On one hand, if we talk specifically about bands in the underground, bands we all listen to, bands the Legion are into, then I'd say we're in boom times, golden age when it comes to creativity. There are so many bands every single year putting out top-notch music, and I talk about it every single year on the Countdown episodes, which is why those Countdown episodes have turned into a 3-part series now, because there's just too much to go through, and I want to make sure that those bands get the recognition that they deserve. Achilles, Antichrist Imperium, Werewolves, the list goes on. When it comes to metal as a whole, like in the broader scheme of things, the metal genre, when you think about it in terms of like the big bands, Metallica, Iron Maiden, Anthrax, Megadeth, Slayer, blah, 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 I actually think the metal scene has got a fucking huge problem, because what I see, and you guys tell me if you think I'm wrong, is the same legacy bands headlining all of the big festivals year in and year out. What I do not see are those legacy bands passing the torch or providing that same mentorship that, say, Ozzy Osbourne provided to Metallica back in 1986 when he took them on the road, when they had released Master of Puppets. And that was widely regarded as a turning point for Metallica. Same deal with Skid Row taking Pantera out. What do we have when Metallica's out on tour right now? They've got Limp Bizkit and Ice Nine Kills with them. Pantera, they've gone maybe a little further afield. They've got King Parrot and whatnot with him. But I mean, let's be honest, is King Parrot going to be the fucking biggest band in metal, or the band that headlines Download in 5 years' time from now? Absolutely fucking not. That sort of layer of bands that are big-ish but not quite legacy bands yet, like Slipknot, Ghost, Avenged Sevenfold, Bring Me the Horizon, Lamb of God. I mean, they are, 6, 7, and 8 albums deep into their careers. Many of them, I would argue, are already basically starting to lose interest in their music. If you ask me as a guy who's a fan of most of what Lamb of God did, with the exception of the last album to me sounds like a band that are totally disinterested in what they're doing. They've also lost a bunch of, or at least a very core member in Chris Adler, and I think that they're done. Slipknot, were fucking has-beens on the when they released their debut album, but now, I mean, God fucking forbid, they are the worst thing ever. And then, Avenged Sevenfold, Bring Me the Horizon stuff, I don't really pay attention to that, but I know they're not the same draw as a Metallica or an Iron Maiden or anybody like that. So, then you take the layer below, and what do you have? Sleep Token, Lorna Snore, who else is there? Pale Face Swiss, Ghost. I mean, again, Ghost is probably like a step below those pre-legacy bands, but again, I mean, Ghost isn't even really metal. Ghost is fucking pop music now. You may as well, if you want to listen to truly edgy shit and you're listening to Ghost, you may as well go and listen to fucking Lady Gaga. Then Lady Gaga should be just as edgy to you. I listened to that new Ghost single, and I cannot for the fucking life of me understand how people are still into that band. And there are still many, if I judge by by what I see on the socials. People here in the UK in particular fucking flip out anytime that Ghost is going to play at some hole somewhere. And I just don't get it. I get that you might like the first 2 albums, but everything after that is fucking dreadful. And their previous album was a pile of dog shit. So is this new one. But yeah, anyway, none of those bands that I just mentioned, those newer bands, Sleep Token and all that other shit. What is it? Spirit Box. I mean, does anybody here seriously think that any of those bands have the longevity of a Metallica? None. I don't think there's anyone. And are there other bands that I think could pick up the torch and have the potential to be a Metallica-sized band? No. Even the ones that I like, Spirit World, I think is excellent. Power Trip, unfortunately, dealt with their tragedy, and I don't think it's one that they're gonna. If we're just blunt about it, I cannot see them overcoming that. They're not going to be as big of a band as I think everybody thought they could be after the release of their first album. So yeah, I feel like metal is in a tough spot because when these bands all start to retire, and they will in the next decade, all of these big bands are going to retire. I don't know how they're going to keep a lot of these festivals afloat, these big festivals. I think there's clearly always going to be a demand for the smaller festivals. I think in our scene, in our movement, black metal, death metal, I think we're going to be perfectly fine and healthy, but it's always going to stay a niche that, a select group of people are going to listen to. Maybe there'll be a couple of bands that kind of break out of the mold or break the what would you say, the glass ceiling, but it'll be few and far between, I think. Because the thing also is, for them to be able to break the glass ceiling, they have to play with a bigger band. You guys tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I since I got that question, I've been pondering it long and hard, and that's what I land on. I land on the future not being particularly positive for metal as a big genre. I mean, we're never going to see the glory days. I know things come in roundabouts, but we're never going to see the glory days of the early 90s or the mid 90s. Griff_in_2 asks, what are your 5 most memorable moments from WWE? I'm going to give you 6. Number 1, Stone Cold versus Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13. I was already smart to the business by the time that I saw that match, and I was still pissed off about the outcome for at least 3 weeks, which tells you that it was an exceptional match, one of the best matches ever. That whole feud, as a matter of fact, was one of the greatest ever. Stone Cold dropping the Austin 316 promo for the first time at King of the Ring 1996. I remember distinctly watching that. You would have never have expected somebody in WWE to say the stuff that Stone Cold did on that promo, to speak that openly and take that sort of stance against religion. Almost blaspheming. But when he did it, I was out of my seat cheering. To me, that was just the coolest thing ever. And Stone Cold instantly became a childhood hero from that day on. Number 3, Ric Flair winning the Royal Rumble in 1992, the first major match I can remember myself being so invested in that I was literally screaming at the television when he finally won. Ric Flair was a hero of mine. I always loved the bad guys, and Royal Rumble 1992 is a masterclass from the Nature Boy. Number 4, Shane McMahon going through the glass at King of the Ring 2001. One of the best matches, if not my favorite match of all time. It is just brute force violence. As much of a work as wrestling is, if you know anything about the match, you know that Shane was concussed after he hit the glass for the first time and it didn't break as planned. He said, carry on with the match. Meanwhile, you've got McMahon and people backstage screaming, saying they need to stop it, and it just carries on. Unbelievable train wreck wrestling. Loved it. Number 5, Mankind falling from the top of the cell at King of the Ring in 1998. Just absolutely phenomenal, a classic match. And then number 6, also related to Mick Foley / Mankind, Randy Orton, when he took that bump into the thumbtacks at Backlash 2004. If my favorite match is Shane McMahon versus Kurt Angle at King of the Ring, and Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Bret Hart at WrestleMania, then number 3, a very, very close number 3, is most definitely Cactus Jack against Randy Orton, Backlash 2004. They teased the bump into those thumbtacks a couple of times, and when it finally happened, the look on Randy's face told you everything that you needed to know about whether or not those thumbtacks were plastic-tipped or rubber-tipped, as some people thought they might be. That was the real deal, and it hurt like fuck. So there you go, my 6 favorite WWE memories. On to more music. And Oceans have put out a new track 1 month prior to the release of their new album, The Regeneration Itinerary. Symphonic black metalers and Oceans premiere a performance and studio video for the third single, Fornjelse I tre akter. Apologies to everybody in Finland for what I've just done to your language, but let's hear what the song sounds like. That most definitely earns a top notch, the first for this week, actually. That opening riff reminds me a little bit of, and I'm trying to, this is one of those things when you're recording something without any interruptions, I'm trying to think whether it reminds me of Emperor's Cosmic Keys to My Creations and Times or I Am the Black Wizards. Either of those two have a riff that sound quite similar to the opening riff on this song. Not a total rip-off, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's at least an intentional nod to it. Now, that being said, as the song progresses, super intense on that verse, more intense than I honestly expected An Oceans to be, especially after we heard that previous single. The previous single I liked, but I kind of reserved my judgment for it a little bit because it sounded to me like it was hinting back at some of the late 90s, early 2000s stuff that they put out, which is not quite my tempo. But super intense on the verse, and then we've got this fucking cool atmospheric sort of break, chorus, bridge, whatever you want to call it, the bit we paused on now. Always like me a church bell when it's deployed strategically and effectively. It's most certainly the case here. So everything, yeah, I love. Those vocals sounded fucking nasty as hell also. The drums sounded superb. This is unequivocally a top-notch. On to another song, my friends. Yeah, it's been an interesting selection of tunes this week. Ontfod have unleashed a brand new track called Svartsen. I really like that previous Ontfod single. I'm a big fan of this band, as you all know. It says here, black metal operatives from Finland, Ontfod, have shared a video for Swartzen, the newest preview tune of their forthcoming record, Dimsval. The latter will be released by Eisenwald on CD, LP, or cassette on May the 16th, 2025. Fuck yes. As soon as I heard that double vocal part and he's pumping his fist as he's shouting it, that it went from thumbs up to a top notch straight away. It's maybe a little bit more melodic than I would like, but honestly, when you're delivering it with so much conviction and so much passion and so much aggression, it's fucking excellent. Really, really good. Great previous single as well. This is a record that I think is going to stack up pretty favorably on the old annual best of list. Really, really, really cool stuff. And I do need to see if I can get one of these dudes on the podcast. I mean, the Finns, if we're completely fair, and I do have several people from Finland that listen to the podcast, but they'll know what I'm talking about. But many Finns that I come across, they're not the most talkative folks. But maybe if I catch them in the summer, who knows, they'll be in a good mood. My favorite Finn, Jerry, a.k.a. Rauta, I think myself and Cheyenne are due another Unholy Podcast Alliance episode pretty soon. I need to drop those blokes a line and see if we can get that sorted out. But before we do any of that, let's answer another question. Dry Lung Vocal Martyr has asked a question, but it's really a challenge more than it is a question. He's asked me to curate a black metal and death metal festival featuring bands that emerged specifically in the 2000s. So 2000 to 2009. I have to select 5 bands for each genre. The caveat is no bands that started in the 1990s, 2010s, or 2020s are allowed. Thank you for all the great work. So this is obviously fucking difficult. The way that I approached it was I went on to Grok and I basically said, give me a list of 50 bands or death metal bands that started in between 2000 and 2009. And I just kept on repeating that as I went through the list. So I may have missed a couple of obvious ones here, but this was not done in isolation. I actually did put some thought into this. So the other thing is I actually gave myself another caveat, and that caveat was I'm not allowed to use a band that is broken up. So when it comes to black metal, for example, I didn't use Aosoth because they may have started, I think, in 2006, but they then broke up later on. So they're not used. So 2000 to 2009 only. We call our hypothetical Into the Necrosphere Festival the Depussification of the Nation Fest 2028. And we run it on a Saturday and a Sunday. On a Saturday, of course, that's the day for death metal. So we start off with Grave Miasma. They started in 2002. Then we've got Ulcerate. They started in 2000. Straight after Ulcerate, after we've hit you guys with some atmospheric yet also crushing death metal, We hit you with some fucking hard shit. Despised Icon, they started in 2002, and I know for an absolute fact live they are killer. Psychroptic would be next. They started in 2000, and then Cattle Decapitation also starting in 2000. They would headline the Saturday evening, the death metal night. They are also, of course, a great band, even though maybe too many people like them. But I mean, that shouldn't detract from the fact that they're a good band. Sunday is the Lord's Day, which means it's the perfect day for the black metal section of our festival, and we will kick off with Chaos Moon. They started in 2004. Then we'll have Sargeist. They started in 2000. Then I couldn't possibly host a black metal festival and not have my brothers in Tombs, who started in 2007, and my brothers in Trivax, who started in 2000, and I think it was 2009, or it might have been 2008, but they still qualify. Have them back to back, and then headlining the black metal portion of the Depussification of the Nation Fest, Achilles, who started in 2009. So again, let me know if you think I missed anybody there. But those are the bands that I would have on the list without a shadow of a doubt. And I know there's somebody somewhere that's going to say, "How could you forget Maguire?" Easily, I forgot them. So they were. Would I call them number 6? I like Maguire, but I'm also, I don't know. I'm bored a bit of that particular style of black metal. I find it, again, I find it lacks threat. It lacks menace. Caustic Wound have got a new song out, Grinding Mechanism of Torment, the new album from Pacific Northwest grindcore outfit Caustic Wound, featuring members of Magruder Grind and Mortiferum, is now available for streaming ahead of its official release tomorrow, April the 25th on Profound Law Records. You can listen to it below. Grinding Mechanism of Torment, I assume, is code for the ABC TV show The View. Let's hear what it sounds like. All right, we actually listened to 2 whole songs there, or almost two whole songs. Grinding Mechanism of Torment was the first one that lasted a whopping 40-odd seconds. And then we had Blood Battery. Blood Battery sounded pretty decent. Nice, rolling groove. Enjoyed it. And actually, as grind goes, that's not too bad. But for me, the cream of the crop when it comes to grind are Pig Destroyer, the first 2 Brutal Truth albums, and Cephalic Carnage. By the way, Cephalic Carnage were actually on the list. I couldn't remember. I think they may have started in 1998, which is why I discounted them. And they're also not exactly like traditional death metal, but live they are fucking brilliant. I remember them opening for Hate Eternal. This was like maybe 2006, 2007. Mopped the floor with them. And I'm a much bigger fan of Hate Eternal's music than I am of Cephalic Carnage. But that night was Cephalic Carnage's night. Slaughter to Prevail have got a new album out in July. I don't know about you guys, but I suspect this is down to the fact that I watch J-Dog's channel every single day. I almost don't even think of them as Slaughter to Prevail anymore. I look at the name on a screen or on a piece of paper, and my mind sees it. It reads it as Slaughter to Gay Vale. So, anyway, fucking terrible band, and the fact they got a new album out, yawn. Don't know why anybody likes them. I think they're an overrated load of fucking trash. Exodus present a cover of the Scorpions. He's a woman, she's a man. Not going to listen to that. Black Braid have announced a new studio album. Look, I still hold by my assessment of the situation that occurred at Midgard's Blot. I said it at the time. You know, the bloke is young. He had a bit too much to drink. He, there was a lapse in judgment on his side. But I do feel like everybody that's jumping up and down, miserable and upset about the fact that, he cried racism and did whatever he did, I do think that they kind of need to also snap into perspective. We had, back in the day, Mike Patton from Faith No More urinating on security guards. That happened in 2002 at the London Astoria. All of the bands that we loved from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, I mean, there was at least every other day some fucking scandal on a Guns N' Roses tour or on a Metallica tour or on an Ozzy Osbourne tour. And a lot of that stuff, if you were to remove our affection or the affection we have attached to the name of the person from the incident, we would go, man, what a fucking douchebag. So, and that's why it doesn't really bother me all that much. Saw Black Braid last year at Fortress. Didn't think he was too bad. He does make one big mistake, and that's to turn his back on the audience. But that's just a pet peeve of mine when it comes to frontmen. But I'll be curious to hear what he does next. And I do respect the fact that he has been able to be quite successful entirely off his own back. I don't want to dunk on or hate record labels, but I do feel like, kind of what I was saying to David in the interview. I'm ensconced in business, fucking almost 24/7. So I understand the value chain. I do think within the musical value chain, there's a lot of, in this scene especially, there's a lot of fucking leeches. The worst of which are the venues taking money from bands. I didn't want to go on too much of a rant when I was talking to David, but if I were a band manager, the fucking first thing I would do is to say, if you have that in your contract, we're not playing at this venue. No question about it. I don't give a shit how big the fucking venue is. We just won't do it. We're not going to bring people in to make you money off booze, and then you take money off of us for selling merch. If you want to do that, fine. We take exactly the same percentage from the bar. I think it's fucking ridiculous that people have been allowed to get away with that, because it's just daylight robbery and extortion. All right, one more song, and then we will wrap up with a quick sprint across the Democrats' Guide to Rock Music, Blabbermouth. Pelican have got a new song online. Before their new studio album, Flickering Resonance, officially lands in stores on May the 16th, Chicago, Illinois-based post-metal force Pelican present a visualizer video for the newest single, Pining Forever. was about to say, where the fuck are the vocals? And then I realized this band is an instrumental band, which, in my view, I don't like instrumental bands. If I want to listen to instrumental music, I'll listen to classical music or film scores. The riff was okay, production's decent, but yeah, it's not my thing. I think that instrumental music is the weak man's game. So anyway, one quick question, and then we'll wrap up with a couple of quick blabbermouth headlines. I had one that I can't wait to answer, and this was submitted by Margarita Costa 270. He submitted this in the comments. So by the way, a lot of you guys asked me, where can I submit questions? If you don't follow me on Instagram, which shame on you if you don't, then you can just drop me a note in the comments, send me a DM, get the question across to me however you want. I will save it and I'll answer it when the time comes. But anyway, Margarita Costa asks, what are your top 5 non-rock or metal solo singers or bands you hate more? There's a fucking list as long as your arm, but I'm not going to give you the top 5. I will give you the song I hate the most. By no small stretch of the imagination, I truly mean this when I say this. Of all music ever written that I have heard, the song I despise the most is Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen. And if I ever became the supreme ruler of planet Earth, the first people lined up before the firing squad will be everybody, including Carly Rae herself, who worked on that steaming pile of cock cheese. The worst thing I have ever heard in my entire existence. As far as others, just off the top of my head, there's a band called Free. Was it Free? No, Fun. Not Free. Free do, what's the name? Is it, it's All Right? I don't, anyway. Fun is the name of the other band, and that fucking shit song, Tonight We Are Young. They used to play that at pubs here all the time. The biggest morons to ever fucking slither out of their mother's womb would go absolutely fucking skits whenever the song played. And to me, it's just the antithesis of everything that is great about music. How any kid can go with a straight face to their parents and say, hey, Mom, Dad, check out this new band I'm into. They're called Fun. I'd fucking disinherit my children if they listen to garbage like that. Every single thing that Rihanna has ever done, fucking awful. She'd face the firing squad as well. Work in particular being the worst thing I've ever heard. I mean, Work is like it feels to me like she was at that point just trolling everybody. She was like, I'm gonna show you what happens when I sniff a few rails of the old snow and just mumble my way through a song incoherently and try and pass that off as lyrics, because all she's doing is just going work, 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 fucking like a complete simpleton for 4.5 minutes. I mean, I'm gonna just say this out of the kindness of my heart. If one of your kids likes that, you probably want to have them checked for a learning disability or Asperger's of some sort, because no one with a fucking functioning brain could like that trash. So I'll stop there. I'm getting fired up now. But those are my most hated songs ever. And again, as I said, if I ever took over the earth as its supreme ruler, a couple of people are going to have a fucking rough night for the music that they made whilst I was in my ascendancy. Okay, over on Blabbermouth, Slayer's Kerry King has commented on his current relationship with Tom Araya. He's not the guy I started the band with. There is an interview here conducted by Luis Cesar Pimentel of Brazil's Cucamonga. How in the fuck Cucamonga got an interview with Kerry is anybody's guess. But anyway, let's hear what old Mr. King had to say.
And what about your relation? You and Tom Araya, I have to ask, in particular, has always been quite reserved. What was it like for you with Jeff's death and the end of Slayer? Not the end of Slayer, but the you know what I mean. And where are you today, you and Tom Araya?
I think Jeff's passing weighed harder on Tom than it did me. And I don't mean that from any kind of friendship perspective. It's just my taking wasn't as bad as Tom's taking. You understand?
Uh-huh.
Like, of course, it was horrible, and no one ever wanted that to happen, but it really weighed on Tom. And I think that's what led to him wanting to retire earlier than me, because I think he felt the band was different.
Okay.
But, then out of nowhere, Tom decided he wanted to play some shows last year, and I went, well, I never wanted to stop playing shows. So, yeah, let's try it out. But it's just like it was in Slayer, we don't talk on the phone. We rarely text each other. And that's just because when you're together for 40 years, he became a very different person.
Yeah.
And
grandfather now.
Yeah, he's not the guy I started a band with.
Okay.
Not personally, just him. He's a different person. I basically stayed very similar to who I've been in my 20s. And I like Tom. We're cool. We got together. It wasn't weird. We did those 2 shows. He was super happy. We got together after the second one. Had a shot after the show. Tequila. He'll drink tequila.
All right, I'm gonna pause there. There's quite a lot to unpack in what he said there. It's interesting that he says that he's the same dude that he was in his 20s than he is now, and Tom has changed a lot. And my experience, I've said this before, I think it was on an episode that I was recording with Cheyenne. I personally think a man does most of his growing up between the ages of 20 and 35. I think women mature more quickly than men. At least they used to. Now, in the era of OnlyFans, who the fuck knows? But at least for me, a huge amount of personal growth and development and evolution. My thinking evolved massively between the ages of 20 and 35. And I don't know whether, if somebody were to meet me right now that knew me when I was 20 years old, where they would say, you were exactly the same person today that you were then. I doubt very much that they would. I still like a lot of the same stuff. But I think some of the things that changes about you as a person and as a man is you start to, if you're going to make anything of yourself, you start to prioritize what's important. You start to, remove from your life what you don't want in your life anymore. I mean, I'm not going to, this isn't a fucking self-help. This isn't a self-help podcast. But, it's for me, people that are almost proud of the fact that they haven't changed when they're in their 50s versus what they were like when they were 21, 22. There's a bit of arrested development going on there, in my view. And I'm not saying that is necessarily a slight on Kerry King, but it explains why those two have drifted apart, and it's sad. I remember seeing the, I think it's a Live Intrusion DVD, and they show Slayer backstage, and they always seem to have a really great, or at least from the videos that you saw backstage from that DVD, there seemed to be a lot of great camaraderie there, and they seem to enjoy each other's company. But yeah, I mean, I had always speculated that Jeff's passing had a very, very big impact and a big influence on what eventually happened to Slayer. Certainly from a creative perspective. I mean, like I've said many times before, when Jeff started becoming less active as a songwriter, Slayer's music just wasn't as good. I don't know. I mean, and again, Kerry wrote a lot of great stuff in the early days, but I feel like almost the absence of Hanneman's input, him inputting his own songs, it lowered the level of competition for Kerry, and maybe Kerry's one of those guys that's at his best when he has to rise to the occasion. But either way, I think when all is said and done, I am actually still pretty glad that Kerry's out doing music, even though I didn't necessarily flip out over the Kerry King solo album. I do feel like a world without Kerry King, maybe this will sound strange, but I think it'll sound. I think a world without Kerry King would be weird to me. That's the best way to describe it. Love or hate the bloke. I just think I don't think metal will be the same without him. Anyway, last one, and then we'll wrap up. Wasp's Blackie Lawless music has become disposable. And it's really sad. Another interview, again, with a fucking podcast in Peru. I've reached out to Blackie Lawless. I certainly know that this podcast has a far bigger following than this Peruvian podcast. No disrespect intended, but yeah, I'm gonna have to see what I can do to make something like this happen, because he would be a fucking great guest. And if I get him on, I'm gonna have to have Swatalv on as well. I'm gonna have to have someone who's as big of a Wasp fan as I am to join me for that one. Kind of like when Joe Rogan had on fucking Tony from Kill Tony, when he had Hulk Hogan, he had him on, and when he had Ric Flair on, he had him as well. So anyways, enough fucking bullshit. We heard what the headline was. Let's hear what Blackie had to say on this interview.
And another question, what do you think about the current state of the music industry now that we have streaming, artificial intelligence, social media? How do you manage that?
It's a real problem because music has become disposable.
Yeah.
Music is not what it used to be years ago. And years ago, if you wanted a record, you had to work, save your money, and then go buy that record.
Mm-hmm.
Today, fans don't do that. You know, the music it's like going into their kitchen and turning on the water.
Yeah.
It's there all the time. And that's sad because it doesn't put value on the music. Because the artist, he trades his labor for the fans' labor. That's the way it used to be. And that does not exist anymore because, like I said, the value that's put on the music from the public's from where the public really exists, that respect for the music is not what it used to be. And it's really sad, and it's changed the music business tremendously.
I have spoken about this loads of times to various guests that I've had on the podcast. My theory has always been the fact that people no longer have to physically hand over money to get access to music that they want to listen to has devalued or has lowered the value of music in their eyes. And that's why I think you don't see people go as crazy at shows anymore as what they used to. And that's why I think you see so many people standing through an entire show with their fucking cell phones up there, above their heads, recording what they've seen so they can put some shitty recording up on YouTube or on Instagram or whatever, and they can get clicks and likes. I saw clips the other day of the first Acid Bath reunion show, and there was literally in the front row, I could count at least 10 people that had their phones up for the entirety of basically the entirety of the show. Now, if you had some obnoxious fucking light source that you held above your head back in 1986 at a Slayer show, I think we all know what would have happened to that phone. It would have been, you would have required a proctologist to get that out from your rectum. If at best, at worst, it would have been fucking smashed up and fed to you. But it would never, ever have been tolerated at a show in the 80s or even in the early 90s. And now it's just commonplace. And, again, it's one thing to, take a quick snap, put it on Instagram. That's fine. Everyone does that nowadays. But why people have to stand in the fucking front row in front of everybody, obscuring their vision, ruining their fucking enjoyment to do that, I have no idea. But a big chunk of it is down to the fact that there's more value in likes on fucking Instagram than there is in actually going there and experiencing music. Because, you can listen to the music all the time, any day you want. And I know you pay for the ticket, but I mean, most of these fucking grifters that stand in the front get everything free anyway. Not to name names, but there's an awful lot of people that I see who have podcasts or YouTube channels or are part of magazines, and they're the biggest fucking sponges of them all. They try and fleece record labels and PR people for every last fucking cent, everything they can possibly get out of them, and I find it absolutely fucking disgraceful. You know what I don't find disgraceful? Destroyer 666. Spoke about them when I was talking to David. By far, one of the greatest Australian extreme metal bands on the face of the earth, and a perfect band to wrap up this week's episode of Into the Necrosphere. Off the album Cold Steel for an Iron Age, we're going to listen to the song Cold Steel. I want to say a massive thank you to David from Atrae Bilis for coming on the show. I want to say a big thank you to Trivax and Conspiracy X for letting us host their premieres on this week's installment of the podcast. And I will say a massive thank you to the Legion for sticking around until the very end. My friends, as always, whatever it is that you are doing and wherever it is that you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you bad motherfuckers again next week.